Now, if you two don't mind, I'm going to bed before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed. Or worse, expelled.
She needs to sort out her priorities.
Welcome to the Mad Max Minute. I've got a strange sinking feeling as we wrap up this week of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, 1 minute at a time. I'm Rick.
And I'm Julia.
And today we're talking about minute 72, which begins with Max and the others finding Mr. Skyfish's kite, and it ends with Screwloose grasping at the short end of the proverbial and some could say literal stick.
Aww.
Wrapping up this week with us is everybody's favorite no-match duo, Gary Roby and Victoria Cope from the Harry Potter Minute.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
I hope you don't mind I used the American nomenclature for non-magical people.
I thought about protesting it, but, we are in California, so.
Yeah.
Do you honestly believe that the California-dwelling wizarding community would not come up with an even more obnoxious name for non-magical folk?
Oh my god, you're so right.
Would. Yeah, for sure.
We're gonna have to think about this, and we'll come back to it.
Regional slang is regional. It wouldn't just be
no matches everywhere across the
everywhere.
Yeah, no way. No way.
Like the South would have their thing, and then California would have their.
England is a fairly small place compared to somewhere like California.
Yeah.
And everyone in that region has their own slang, so it stands to reason everyone on the West Coast would have their word for it. You know, you'd have your Tupac wizarding crowd, and then over on the East Coast, they'd have a different word for the Biggie crowd.
Exactly.
Sure.
And you'd have these cross-coastal wizard conferences where they'd be using all these different slang terms and being all different.
We're just gonna do this tangent anyway. This is gonna keep happening. I was thinking about what spells and magic casting is like in different places. We briefly talked about Australian wizards, but I'm sure that the way that the Australian wizards or Aboriginal ones would cast their spells would be vastly different from the way that it's taught at Hogwarts. And if the way magic is used is different regionally as well, then maybe even the terms used for spell casting changes. The spells of Hogwarts are very Latin based, but that doesn't necessarily mean if it's more to do with the intention than the actual word said, then even the spell names could be different. And then you just get a lot of surfer slang and stuff.
In the lead up to Fantastic Beasts, J.K. Rowling came out and talked about Native American wizards and how they were really good with wandless magic.
Yep.
When the subject of Aussie wizards came up on the Harry Potter Listeners Army page on Facebook, and I made a comment about, we need more Aussie wizards. Obviously, the Anglo wizards would have the same spell casting, but the Aboriginal wizards, I feel like different. Their method of casting would be very, I want to say, singing based.
Oh, I'm sure.
Back when we were doing hiatus, we watched Where the Green Ants Dream.
Oh.
And in that depiction of the Aborigines, they have very specific group singing activities, and they have very specific dances they do, and they're very location and direction based. So I imagine that an Aborigine wizard, instead of saying a phrase that sounds Latin-y, they'd probably sing something.
Yeah. Well, I'm really fascinated to see, there's been a lot of talk that the character of Nicholas Flamel is going to be introduced in the next Fantastic Beasts movie that comes out later this year. And traditionally, he's referred to as an alchemist, and so I really, really hope that means that the magic he uses is different than what we've seen before.
Oh,
but I don't know if they're going to go that far. But I imagine
Nicholas
that
Flamel shows up and he just has a bunch of tiny little glass bottles.
Yes!
And those are his spells.
Be so cool. Be so cool.
Should give him a Chewbacca-style bandolier.
Yeah, I think there's an alchemy class at Hogwarts you can take, but I don't know if it's, I don't know how extensive it is. Whereas he's referred to as an alchemist. That seems like a very different thing. I don't know.
Yeah, the fact that he's one of the alchemist group instead of the singular alchemist.
Yeah.
Well, alchemy in our world, in the Muggle world, alchemy is specifically the quote-unquote science of creating the Philosopher's Stone and
A lot of it is like transmutation of materials, and the Philosopher's Stone seems to be like the epitome of that. But a lot of other sorts of like transmutation and stuff and things like that get like tied back to it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I know that oh my goodness, Isaac Newton, even though he like invented calculus and did all this other like theory of gravity, but he was also really fascinated with like alchemy, and he used it to like make predictions about like when the world was going to end.
Yeah, Newton was famously weird.
Yeah, and
it's
fascinating to me. I think it's so cool. I really do hope that we see like something different, like magic used in a way we haven't seen before.
Mm-hmm. But I imagine that the wizarding world would look at like what Papagallo and the compound dwellers were doing, pulling crude out of the ground and transmuting it into usable fuel. They'd probably look at that and say, oh yeah, that's alchemy.
Yeah.
Even though it's done with science and not magic.
There was it's interesting. Alchemy is from a time where that like the lines between those were really blurred.
Right. We were figuring out what was science. Like it was still being defined.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Elements were still being defined, and the very concept of science and things we would describe now as magical were still being separated.
Yeah, it's like famous Australian Chris Hemsworth said as Thor.
Your ancestors called it magic, and you call it science. Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same thing.
Yeah.
I keep trying to make quick little connections back to Australia to keep a hold of our regular listeners, who I'm sure are just fascinated to no end by all this Harry Potter talk.
We just carry it with us. It's hard to separate.
Exactly. Speaking of separating, we start off today's minute with the searchers following a set of tracks, and these are the tracks that I mentioned at the tail end of yesterday's minute that make up the first quarter of this minute. Yeah. These tracks are supposed to be the tracks left behind by a crawling gecko, but instead of having the whole thing where they find Gecko and give him water and everything, we cut straight to a shot of Mr. Skyfish's kite seen flying high above the dunes. This detail of them finding the kite is also included in the storybook. As they're walking along while dragging Gecko, Tubba is the one that finds the kite, and they make a beeline for it because it's very obvious that at the end of that kite string is Skyfish, because Skyfish is the wind kite dude.
I know practically the kite is up in the air because Mr. Skyfish, his hands are busy doing something else. So of course, if he wasn't already flying the kite, which why wouldn't you? Even if he was carrying it, he would no longer be carrying it because something else has taken his attention. But I like to think that he let it go up and fly as a signal to anybody who might be nearby, out looking for them, that, hey, we are right here. We want to be found now. Please come find us.
We are in trouble. Please
we need help.
Yeah, as an SOS.
Yes.
Yeah, that's clever.
When I initially thought of it, I thought it was an example of their naivete. The fact that Skyfish would be out there, he'd be like, oh, we've got a good wind. I'll let the kite up and let the kite fly, and just caring not at all that they might be attracting a poor amount of attention because they're ill-equipped to deal with strangers. But I like the idea that it's used specifically as a call for help. It makes a lot of sense.
That also makes me wonder, were they expecting somebody to come after them?
It's very low chances.
Mm-hmm. What did they think was going on back at camp?
Do you think that it was helpless, that they left and no one was going to care? This is a terrible way for all these kids to go.
I don't think they expected help to come from the waiting ones. I think they considered themselves on their own, and if the kite was sent up intentionally as an SOS, they were just doing it in the hopes that someone...
Just anyone might be out there.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of using a kite to attract attention, and it got me thinking about, and this is just how my mind works as far as tangents are concerned. There is a movie from Peter Jackson coming out in December called Mortal Engines, and it is a post-apocalyptic story about the human race have survived an apocalyptic episode that only lasted for about an hour, but it decimated the entire planet, and now cities exist by being built upon these giant cars. So it's cities driving around the world, eating up smaller cities as they go. And I got thinking about that and I thought, oh, how cool would it be? And this is like a potential Mad Max story. You have out in the wasteland a caravan or a trading station or something large and imposing like you would see in the Mortal Engines just out in the wasteland rolling along. And Max just comes across it. And, oh, hey, it's this caravan / trading outpost type of situation. And maybe they have a fancy gimmick for how they're able to stay moving.
Yeah.
But he could get involved and mixed up with them. And it would probably be a pretty interesting story.
That would be really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'd be pretty awesome.
Because train sequences are pretty cool. Anyone who liked Snowpiercer will agree with that. And it would be really cool if you had a land-based caravan train that shenanigans would happen on, in, and around.
Right? You'd have that inevitable, like, big chase sequence that would happen at some point. Be so good. I'd be into that. I would watch the hell out of that.
Absolutely. Granted, I'd watch the hell out of any Mad Max content.
Yeah. Do you know, are they working on, like, whatever the follow-up to Fury Road is going to be?
Oh, they're held up in court.
Oh, no.
Warner Brothers and George Miller are having a disagreement, and it's just not very clear as to who is on the correct side at this point. I'm siding with George Miller against the giant studio, but that's not everyone's opinion, so I just hope that it gets resolved so that we can eventually get something beyond Fury Road.
Yeah. Yes.
I have my fingers crossed.
I think it's funny that after Fury Road, it seems like there's like this influx of like Mad Max being on people's minds, and then you get all these spoofs all of a sudden. Like, Rick and Morty had an episode in which it's all very Mad Max.
Well, there was like such a huge gap between this one and Fury Road.
And then the trailer for the Lego movie just came out, and it looks very Bartertown and Mad Max.
I didn't even think about that.
In the beginning of that trailer. So I'm just like, what the heck? This is funny. I like it. I think it's great.
That's because it's kind of returned the Mad Max franchise into like
this is
the culture consciousness.
Well, it's like they took the teen dystopian stuff that they've already been kind of like burning and like into the ground, and being like, let's make this more adult again, and get away from the young adult stuff and just make it like hardcore. Yeah,
we've been going back to that well so often with the zombie post-apocalypses and the teenagers are important post-apocalypses. We need to get back to the engine-based post-apocalypses where everything is brown and everyone has guns. And that's actually kind of why I'm looking forward to the Mortal Engines, because there are just so many cool vehicles.
Yeah.
I remember I saw the trailer for that and I was just like,
this looks so rad.
This is awesome.
I kind of want to read those books. Like, we have them at the bookstore I work at, and I have not bothered to pick them up.
Oh.
I went out and I looked on Amazon. And I know, Gary, you working at a brick and mortar bookstore, you probably hate the mention of that company, but I don't have any good small bookstores that I know of close by. Otherwise, I would just go there. But I seriously considered just ordering the books so I could read up on it. But then I remembered my rule of thumb. So you always watch the movie first, read the book second, because you're going to get more out of the book.
Yep.
It's so funny because, like, for a long time, I was of the other opinion. Like, growing up reading, like, being such a voracious reader, I was always of the, like, no, you gotta read the book first. But, like, that always leads to dissatisfaction. Yeah. Always.
Mm-hmm. No, I was the same
way. It's like, why would you purposely disappoint yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even for recent movies, like when Gone Girl came out, I went and I read the book before I saw the movie. Yeah, but I mean that's very close. Actually,
I think if you do it the other way around, it's just like, oh, like, here's what the movie is. Like, let me go like dig into this world further.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like enjoying Lord of the Rings and then checking out Silmarillion. Like, you're just kind of pulling in more of the world building stuff.
Yeah, I think if I had seen the Harry Potter movies before I ever read the books, I think I would be a bigger fan of the movies than I am.
Sure.
But I read the books first and was a big, huge fan of the books, so I felt a little disappointed by the movies.
Yeah, it's been a little while since I've gone back and read the later books, and so, like, for me, because it's a lot easier to, like, throw the movies on than to, like, go back and reread right now, the movies have become a little bit more commonplace. And very often we'll get people that'll be like, well, in the book it says like this. And I'm like, well, yes. But we also are scrutinizing this minute by minute. And we have to take what's in the film, you know?
Right. You're not analyzing the books, you're analyzing the movies.
Tightrope walk that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Besides, oftentimes you watch the movie, you get a lot out of it, and then you go back and read the book and you discover just so much more.
Yeah, you get
it.
a little bit more of that richness rather than doing the other way around and just being like dissatisfied by like, oh, why did they include this? And oh, they changed that guy.
Yeah. Like in the book version of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, you get the story of where Gecko went.
Yeah.
And what happened to him.
And here, it's just sadness.
Yeah. Speaking of the book being more informative than the movie, and back on Wednesday, I mentioned that there would be clues that the Gecko death thing was originally included in the movie. As we have this shot, after the kite, we go down, we see Max and the others running towards the levers, and then we pan over, see the levers on the dune and whatnot. You can see over the edge of the dune that Eddie, Anna, and Tubba are jogging towards the levers. Max is back there, a little bit further back, and both of his arms are down by his side, and he's walking a little slower as if he's pulling something.
Oh.
So there is visual confirmation that at one point they had in the shot of this movie, Max pulling Gecko.
Interesting.
Like it absolutely happened.
Yeah.
And then of course we pan over and we're focused more on Skyfish, who's holding onto Kusha, who's holding onto a stick, and Screwloose is holding onto the other end of that stick, and he's holding onto Savannah's leg, and she's got a piece of fabric that Finn is holding onto, and Finn is armpit deep in quicksand and barely hanging on, and he's shouting, "Help, help me."
It makes me so sad.
Well, yeah, as it should.
Let me tell you, like, because this movie seemed so much like it didn't seem as like kind of punishing and unforgiving as the last one did. I just, especially having him interact with kids, I definitely thought like, oh, like he's gonna come out here and save everybody, and like this movie's gonna, like, it feels lighter hearted, and then it's not, and it's. I was just, they don't even like draw like too much attention to it next week, I don't think. It's just like, oh, he's gone now.
Yeah.
Right. It's just a thing that happens.
I know. And because because the movie just has to keep going, there's no like moment there to really like take that, like to grieve it. And I felt so like crushed just in the middle of like, oh my God, that kid is gone.
Yeah. And it's awful because you're sitting there and you can hear him crying and pleading for his life. And there's added flavor text because, and this is not something that they made a big deal of in the movie.
Oh no.
But Finn is Savannah's son. So Savannah is holding on for dear life to the end of this piece of fabric because at the other end is her child.
That's hardcore.
Yeah.
Why did you have to make this worse?
Well, it was already pretty bad, especially when you consider that the only reason Finn is there is because Savannah was the one who decided to leave.
That sucks.
And so Savannah's actions and decisions directly lead to Finn being in this situation.
This poor kid.
Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah, that's would not wish that on anyone.
No. This is a downer situation, you guys.
It really is.
We've talked before about their views on parenthood. We don't think they see the roles of mother and father the same way that our modern society does.
Sure. That makes sense because they're more of a tribal society anyway, and typically when you have like smaller groups of bands, like raising children becomes the responsibility of like the group at large, and so there isn't really that like same distinction you get today of like mom, dad, and the kids like in their house with their, you know, family structure. Nomadic groups and like early tribal civilizations were really more communal in that sort of way.
Right, and a lot of the kids that we see in the community as a whole are quite young.
Yeah.
Maybe 5, 6, 7, with no parents around. Nobody who is left is old enough to have kids of this age. Except Savannah, who is Finn's mother. And there is a toddler that's mentioned in the book that is I don't know if it's a boy or a girl. It is Kusha's kid. Who is the pregnant one.
Yeah.
So she's about to have her second. But other than that, I don't think there's really any parents among them. All the parents have taken their leaving. So they have left behind their young children to be raised by the group as a whole.
Do you think that this is a pattern that's going to continue? Like, once the oldest children grow up to that certain age where they decide to leave, and you just have this band of kids that are just responsible for raising the younger ones. Like, it's just perpetuating itself.
Yes, that's exactly what we think would happen if Max didn't come in and ruin everything. And to take it a step further, we theorize that that's not a sustainable method and that eventually this tribe would peter out.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need the adults to stick around long enough to have more than one kid.
Yeah.
They need to, there's a term. It kind of goes along with the idea of zero population growth.
Yeah.
They are having negative population growth. If they want to have a tribe, they need to have positive population growth. So a pair needs to have at least 2 kids, if not more.
Before they leave. In order to sustain this community.
Yeah.
Which they're not doing.
They're not.
No. Have either of you guys played any of the Fallout video games?
Oh, absolutely.
And this totally makes me think of, in Fallout 3, there's a group in a town called Little Lamplight.
Yep.
And essentially, like, once the kids reach a certain age, they're sort of outed to go to, like, Big Town. And so the kids just run themselves. And this is absolutely what this makes me think of.
I love that as we're talking about the tribe and how it works with our various guests from week to week, everybody brings up Little Lamplight.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
Especially with just the post-apocalyptic, like, kids fending for themselves sort of thing. Like, I feel like they just, it's hard not to make that direct correlation.
Yeah, but nobody ever brings up Children of the Corn.
Well, that's a much more sinister version of this.
Children of the Corn, that's not the adults leaving of their own free will. The Children of the Corn murder the adults.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a different situation. That's why no one brings it up.
We're not looking for...
Well, that is my chosen comparison.
Okay.
Speaking of children in a post-apocalyptic setting, in the trailer for the Lego movie, at one point Emmett is walking down the road, a sewer grate pops open, and sewer babies hop out and walk across his path, and he's like, "Good morning, sewer babies."
Oh, no.
I love it. They all got like...
There's a lot of really funny stuff in that trailer.
I'm so excited for that movie.
Oh, man. No, my husband is so looking forward to, like, the possible sets that are going to be made.
Oh, yeah.
Of, like, that post-apocalyptic, like, world.
That's totally his kind of thing.
Yeah. Like, you can get a pack of 10 sewer babies.
Can I get a pack of sewer babies, please? Like, that'd be amazing. I'm hoping that they do another release of like the minifigures that are just in those little blind bags, and just so I can have all the characters.
That's your go-to.
Oh, always those blind bags. Everything. Blind
it was
boxes,
just so
blind
much
bags,
fun.
All of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the set that includes the larger version of Unikitty from the trailer,
Oh my
where
gosh.
she's like just larger and more saber-tooth sized. It's going to be really fun.
When does that come out?
Oh, sometime, I think February 2019.
Oh, okay, so we still got a while.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
I have literally every set from the first...
That doesn't surprise me.
Speaking of looking at things, in the shot where Max drops his water and breaks into a sprint, it's quick. But if you look behind Max at Anna and Tubba, you can see that they're dragging Gecko's litter.
Aww.
So he's still there.
Yeah. You
They're
can totally
really
tell.
clever with their editing, but he's still there.
Aww. They saved him.
I have a quick question about their location.
Okay.
So, obviously, we have seen a sinkhole in the sand before. Is this the same sinkhole?
Ooh.
I want to say yes.
You think so?
I want to say that there's a horse down there.
Well, okay, that's really gruesome then, because not only is Finn going to die by suffocation under the sand, he's going to do so, like, laying on top of a decomposing horse.
Brutal.
Yep.
That's really gross. And that's the first time I actually thought about Finn suffocating under the sand.
Yeah.
It's
brutal.
Crap.
Yep.
So we actually got to talk to the actor who plays Finn McCoo, Adam Scoogle, and he explained how they did this gag. So what I'll do is I'll cut out the audio from that part of the interview we had with him, and I'll throw it into this section here so we can have him explain how he did it.
Nice.
There's one scene in particular that I wanted to ask you about, and that's the scene in which your character gets sucked into quicksand. And I am very curious to know how that was pulled off, because it looks like you're going right into the sand to never be seen again.
Yeah, actually, that was a bit of a trial to go through that, because we had there was like a big hole sort of carved out in the sand, and then they had a machine in the bottom of the thing with like a plinth, and I would have to stand on the plinth. Mm-hmm. And then they also had, a layer around me, like a false sort of floor again, around my sort of just under my arms. And there was like there was a hole in that with latex around it, so I could sort of be moved up on this plinth through that hole and back down, if that makes sense. And they put all this sort of fake sand, it wasn't real sand. It was very, very lightweight, sort of, I think it was latex or something, these tiny, it looked like sand. But that was around me, covering me up. And then it was just a process of going down and coming back up, going down. And we did it over and over again. And they probably used the take where I actually screamed out that I wasn't ready.
Oh,
and
no.
all this bloody sand went into my mouth and I was choking, and George Miller sort of pulled me aside because I had a bit of a meltdown and had a bit of a cry because it was I couldn't breathe. And that's probably the one they used. It was quite effective to see me actually nearly passing out as I'm going through there.
Oh, my word.
It does lend some authenticity.
George Miller was lovely as a director. He was a very lovely person. He was just fantastic. But after that scene, I kind of was crying and carrying on, and he sort of said, you okay? Is everything okay? And we had people come over, and that's how it worked. I was in this sort of on this plinth that moved me up and down out of this top layer, and that's sort of the way it worked. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, there were people underneath the room too, so they would because it was, you'd get stuck and then they'd have to pull you. I'm sure things are a lot different now, 34 years later. But at the time, that was the process. So I had two guys under there and they were sort of pushing me up if I needed to push and pulling me down if I needed to be pulled down. And so it was an experience.
So that's how they do that whole effect.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's really cool. And it definitely sells the effect.
I'm always such a fan of clever practical effect work like this.
He goes from being armpit deep to just his head poking above the sand. And as this minute goes on, he just sinks further and further down. We get several shots in a row, all within a quick 10-second span of time, where we see Savannah struggling and Screwloose struggling, Cush is up there struggling to hold on, Skyfish again, and this whole time Max is running full bore towards them, just trying to get to this kid as fast as he can. It's kind of reminiscent of the end of the first movie.
Oh, crap. Seriously?
Say, did you want to get even more sad?
Yeah, let's just bring us down another notch.
Because at the end of the first movie, when Max's wife and child are run down by the motorcycle gang, Max was not there. He had to run to catch up to them. And so he's in another situation where he's running to try and save a small child.
Oh, no.
And that child's mother.
Oh, no.
So this is him reliving that traumatic thing as well.
It's amazing. And maybe it's because, these movies don't really, play out that way. But it's amazing that we don't spend any time with, how something like this affects Max. It's like he's a stone wall. And it's all just... well, stuff's bad in the apocalypse. And he's just gonna make do and move on. And, it just sort of washes over him like water.
It takes us all the way until Fury Road before we actually start seeing Max crack.
Yeah. Do you think that that's a product of the time?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's something that, storytellers seem more interested in, getting... even more into the heads of their characters now. In the, how does this affect the mental psyche of this character? Or what choices is this character going to make differently because of the things that they've lived through?
We're definitely more interested in that nowadays, like in 2015, as opposed to 1985, where it was like, yeah, we're in the throes of Ozploitation.
Yep, it's just like, well, stuff's bad.
Yeah. Kid dies, yeah, whatever, let's keep moving, that type of thing.
Gotta keep going.
But yeah, the end of this week is tragedy to the extreme, because Finn is getting sucked under the sand, Savannah is struggling to hold on to him because he is her only child, Max is reliving the trauma of chasing after a woman and a little kid who are dying, more or less actively.
If this were a soap opera, Kusha would go into labor right now.
Just for dramatics.
I'm actually surprised she doesn't, because this whole situation is very stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us here for this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Our pleasure. We're so glad that we could have you guys on to help get us through this.
It's
honestly
devastating.
Think about the story that you guys are coming from. Bad things happen to kids all the time.
Oh my gosh, we have been in this space lately in where we are recording for season 2. It's all finished by the point that people are hearing this, but like talking about what it's like for Voldemort to be like possessing the body of Ginny Weasley, and what it's like to like split his soul in half through murder, and like it's so easy to like forget that stuff is really, really dark in Harry Potter sometimes. It's just kind of glossed over in the movies in a way that, like, you don't have time to really consider, like, just how horrifying some of this magic is.
Yeah, when your first movie more or less begins with, oh, hey, here's this baby.
Yeah.
Its parents were murdered in front of it.
Yep.
Have fun with your magic adventure, kids.
We literally see a flashback of like the baby Harry crying as his mother's murdered in front of his eyes, and we don't even really like deal with the repercussions of that.
It's like the prologue of Hunchback of Notre Dame all over again.
Oh no.
How does Harry not grow up to be like a magical Dexter?
He's so afraid that he's gonna go bad. He spends so much time worrying that like maybe he actually is the heir of Slytherin. Like they sort of touch on it, but like it's not given the weight that I think it deserves sometimes.
Right.
And that is a direct parallel to Max.
Yeah.
In the first movie, he quits the MFP specifically because he is afraid of becoming as bad or as violent or as aggressive as the biker gangs that he is fighting. And he worries about the type of person that he is going to become if he keeps going along this path.
Yeah.
So he removes himself from the path.
That's interesting.
But it doesn't work. Like, the path finds him again.
Yeah.
And forces him back on that path. And a difference between Max and Harry is that Max, he embraced that path in the end.
Yeah.
And he spends the next 3 movies like being a wastelander, doing what it takes to survive. And sometimes it's good. Sometimes he risks his life to save children, but other times it's not so good. Other times he makes deals to kill a stranger so that he can get his mode of transportation back.
Yeah.
You know, he's morally malleable.
Yeah.
Sometimes you gotta do what it takes. I keep thinking about the new Solo movie that just came out, and how, like, young Han seems like he wants to be this, doesn't care about anybody, is willing to pull scams to, like, get what he needs, and yet, like, there's still a soft spot that keeps kind of pushing him to, like, help these people that are in need.
Exactly. When it comes down to brass tacks, he does what's right.
Max is a good guy. Yeah.
He's a good guy.
Just wants to help.
And I think we like that in our protagonists.
Yeah.
We don't want them to be perfect. We want them to be flawed so that we can compare ourselves to them, because we're our own worst critics. We know we're not perfect people.
Well, that's the thing, is like, if you have a character that is just always great and always perfect and always makes the right decision, there's nothing interesting in that. Because, like, nobody's like that. You can't identify yourself with that character. But if that character is flawed, if that character has, like, things that they have to overcome, if they have to, like, sacrifice something because they know it's for, like, a greater good. It's why I've always loved, like, I don't mean to, like, reference something totally different, but it's kind of, like, why I love characters like Spider-Man so much. The, like, great power breeds great responsibility sort of idea of like, I would love to just be a kid and live my life and go to the academic decathlon or whatever, but like someone's in danger and if I don't help them, that's on me.
Yeah, and I think Max falls into that category as well, that he has abilities and he has experiences that allow him to help in this situation. And it's at his own risk. He could die out there with the rest of them. We don't see how they stumbled upon this situation, but I imagine they were just walking along and Finn maybe slid down the dune before anybody else and just went right into the sand. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't any fault of his own.
Awful.
He wasn't doing anything foolish. He was just walking along, and that could easily be any of them, and it could easily be Max. But he went out there anyways.
There's no way to know that like the sand, that the ground beneath your feet isn't stable.
Can I cut in real quick since we started talking about sand?
Yeah.
I don't appreciate that this movie reinforces the stereotype that quicksand will slowly suck you under.
Ooh.
Because while that is true for wet quicksand, with dry quicksand, usually you just fall into it and it's a really quick process. I made sure to send you guys a video, and I'll post this video in the listener page.
I did watch this.
Of a scientist explaining how dry quicksand is pretty much just sand that has a lot of air in it, a lot of pockets that can't support weight.
Yeah.
And so when you drop something into dry quicksand, it just shwoomp falls right through and disappears.
This is the fire swamp.
Exactly. So Finn would be walking along the top of the dune, probably slip, slide down the side of the dune, go right into the quicksand, and then disappear completely in an instant. That's how you get those legends of people walking through the desert and then just disappearing.
Just vanishing into the... it sucks.
Because they're basically walking into a hole.
Do you think that is what accounts for, like... I'm just thinking, like, I've heard a bunch of stories of, like, people following footprints of other people, and then all of a sudden they're just gone. And, like, it's not that they've been, like, vanished somewhere else, but, like, the ground just wasn't there to support them anymore.
Yeah. These dry quicksand spots would basically form wherever there's really fine sand and a lot of air blowing through, and it just gets blown up and falls in just the right way, and then you're in a situation where stuff just falls into it.
It's really easy to connect it to Princess Bride.
Mm-hmm.
But while I was watching this, it also in Force Awakens, when Poe and Finn crash on Jakku.
Oh, that's right.
Their TIE fighter gets sucked up into the sand in much the same way. And I think that when Rey first meets BB-8, she's telling him, like, don't go that way, the sands will swallow you. Or something to that effect. Like, the desert will eat you up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, that's horrifying, but it's entirely plausible. This isn't like some weird Star Wars thing. Like, this just happens in the desert.
Yeah.
Yeep.
It's crazy to think of, and it just,
I always thought quicksand like this was like a cartoon thing, like a Looney Tunes thing, but like...
Yeah.
Oh, it's scary.
It just makes me think that if they treated this dry quicksand like actual dry quicksand, the scene would probably be easier to swallow. Because as it stands, we're watching this child slowly be consumed by the desert.
Beep.
Where if it was treated more realistically, yes, we'd have to see Savannah running around screaming for Finn, wondering where he went, but at least it would be over a lot faster.
The fact that they like linger on the struggle of like trying to save him and then failing, that like you get that heavy impact, that like punch of like, stuff's not good here.
Yeah, it's a huge gut punch.
But if he had just like disappeared beneath the surface and like, that's it? I don't know. I think in that case, it sort of happens so quick that it's hard to like experience that sympathy or that moment of like, oh my, like this is rough.
Yeah.
This is hard to watch.
This is heartbreaking. The other way would be just more spooky scary.
Just, oh my, yeah, exactly. It's just that sort of stunned shock of just like, oh my God. And then he's gone.
Yeah.
Ugh, still rough.
It is super rough, and it's a hell of a downer for the end of the week.
Happy Friday, everyone.
Happy Friday. So let's step away from this minute.
Gotcha.
Because we have come to the end of this week. We get to come back next week and continue this crazy quicksand situation, but that's going to be
I'm so sorry
for future us to worry about. For present us, Gary, Victoria, why don't you tell the nice people who've been listening to all of our Harry Potter talk where they can find more of your stuff?
We are on duelinggenre.com, where we have 2 seasons of Harry Potter Minute finished, as well as Ferris Bueller's Minute Off, which we did over the summer of 2017? That feels like so long ago now. But yeah, and we have other projects in the works, but I don't want to talk about them yet because I don't know if they've aired it at the time of this recording. But stuff that we're working on, other projects and podcasts, and so go check that out at duelinggenre.com. And then we've talked about the Listener's Army all week, but if you want more of Victoria and I, the best place to reach out to us is the Facebook group Harry Potter Minute and the Listener's Army, where people interact with the show and we share memes and we talk about all sorts of other content in the Harry Potter universe, the video games that have been happening lately, the Fantastic Beasts movies. So join us over there.
Absolutely. And like I said during season 2 when we had Gary and Victoria on the first time, I absolutely endorse the Harry Potter Minute. Definitely go check it out if it's your cup of tea.
No.
As for us, if our tangents and stuff that's not Mad Max haven't driven you insane, we still have our weekend show. Week 24 is a great week, if I may say so, because Peter's going to save Maggie. Rufio has Hook covered. The pirates are on the run, and to top all of that off, we get to see the start of the showdown between Hook and Pan. It's going to be great, and nothing bad is going to happen. There's nothing tragic about this week of Anarchy Road. It's all cool sword fight stuff, and nothing bad happening to anybody.
Yeah, check it out.
But if you're not one of the people joining us over on our Patreon, that is absolutely fine. Just come back on Monday because we get to see the conclusion of this whole quicksand situation. And, you know, we are forced, as we've been saying all day today, to say goodbye to one of the group.
Aww.
Womp, womp, womp. It's very sad.
It'll be fine, right? They'll save him. They'll pull him back out.
Right.
Everything's going to be okay. Tell me everything's going to be okay.
Yep, we're going to retcon the movie and save Finn McCoo.
Yeah!
So that way he can go to all of the cool places like Bartertown and the bombed out Sydney and all that stuff. It'll be great. Yeah,
That's so
we'll
much.
change it.
That's hard. That's hard. I want to say it's so much better, but
boy.
it's really not, you guys.
We'll see you all once we come back from the weekend. The Mad Max Minute podcast is a fan project by Rick and Julia Ingham.
The Mad Max franchise was created by George Miller and Byron Kennedy, is presented by Kennedy Miller Mitchell Productions, and distributed by Warner Brothers.
Mad Max Minute is produced and edited by Rick Ingham. Our opening music is Verdi's Dies Irae by Daniel Batista of danielbatista.com. And our outro music is We Don't Need Another Hero by MilitiaVox of militiavox.com.
Our home on the internet is madmaxminute.com. You can follow us on Twitter at madmaxminute, like us on Facebook by searching for Mad Max Minute, and join our Facebook listener group, Mad Max Minute Beyond Microphone.
If you'd like to support the podcast, visit madmaxminute.com, where you can check out our TeePublic storefront by clicking the store link, join our Patreon by clicking the support link, or make a one-time donation by clicking the donate link.
Thank you for joining us for Minute 72 of Beyond Thunderdome. We'll see you next time.
Everybody